So one of the things about mindfulness, which for me, that you have to point out immediately, so it's not a silver bullet. It's exercise. It's the way exercise affects everything about us. It's the way studying, socializing, or socializing by socializing is maintaining relationships or building relationships does to us. It is a piece of something, of a whole, that makes us feel that's greater than the sum of its parts. So it's exercise is one part, diet's one part, studying is one part, mindfulness, meditation is another part. And that's the thing about mindfulness that I couldn't grasp early on. Like, should I always be mindful or something like that? That's not the case. You actually do compartmentalize. You later on, as you exercise your mindfulness more, during these moments when you do meditate, there are connections that you take with you throughout the day. There are insights that you take out throughout the day, which allow you to better cope with the stress, the difficulty, the problems throughout life. So that's one. It's compartmental. So I got over that little hurdle. The next hurdle is like how to have self-care and not punish yourself so much when you're trying to do good. So the point, when you're one of the most takeawayable things about most portable things that you can take away from mindfulness is how much we torture ourselves. You learn that in CBT, but in mindfulness, in CBT you write about it. Well, for me, in CBT you write about it. In mindfulness, you reflect on it. You reflect on it during the time that you meditate. Like, why am I so torturing myself, not getting this right? Like, that's not what my time is better spent conditioning myself for a particular course of action, remembering this thing. But it's not one of the things I'm learning when I'm doing my spaced repetition is that I sometimes rush through a question and not really there. I really like skim as quickly and try to finish it because my studies are taking up 3 to 4 hours a day. So it's like I really have to like rush. So where was I getting at? Yeah, there are problems that you just there are things in the day that you just have to pay attention to, and your attention should be mastered, you could say, controlled. I'm trying to communicate that your attention has to work for you, not you to work for it. And that's one of the things that many of us suffer when it comes to our attention. So that's one of the things I'm trying to get at. Like, time and place for mindfulness and improvement in mindfulness. Where does my risk planning, when my risk planning comes from the fear, the visceralness of the fear. And the thing about mindfulness is that you're not supposed to like really shy away from it. The reason why you're able to process things better is because you're not reflexively tensing when you have your fear, when you have your anxiety, when you have your anguish, your anger. You're not tensing, you're feeling it, in a way that you're observing it. So there's one when you're caught up in an emotion and you're performing the action of the emotion, and there's that part sometimes in our lives, and I'm sure everyone's experiences, where you find yourself outside yourself and you're performing the impulse of that emotion. So it's like you see yourself getting angry and doing this thing out of anger, or you're getting frustrated and you're doing this thing out of frustration. And mindfulness is somewhere where you're kind of being able to do that on reflex. You're able to take yourself out of the situation and observe it. You're feeling it. You're feeling the pain. You're just not feeling the other aspects of the pain. You're not buying out, they call it, not buying into the illusion of self, that there's this person that has to be righted when you're angry. There is someone to be protected or shielded when you're afraid. There's just this super being, and that's the thing about what I think about mindfulness, is that you're slowly learning more about the self, to be able to contextualize it with more nuance than a simple ego thing where you're like obsessed about it, or your everything has to be. It's like when you grow up and you're able to contemplate or able to see that this is a better option and this is a not so good option, and it's not your desires to avoid pain and pursue pleasure that motivates it. It's that super organism, or the super connectedness, that does it. And that's one of those things where I'm like, wow, that's gonna be probably a while, and I'm not yeah, it's a while, because like okay, then there's this, okay, so that's like one of those things where how do you become, how are you a good person and yet you do bad things? That's one of those things where you have to have nuance. And this is one of those things where in mindfulness you develop that nuance, like the way, how can we shit and clean ourselves with the same hands that we used to eat. And the nuance there is that we clean those hands, and those hands get really clean and they get really sanitized when we clean them. So those are one of those things that our brain will learn to sanitize. Like the concept of our hands touching something dirty and then touching something clean is like not true. There are times where we touch something dirty, and then there are times we clean it, then we touch something clean. And I guess like time and place does make mindfulness more accessible, or more, I'm able to grasp like how I'm supposed to do this all. Again, the word I use is compartmentalize, which is like one of those things where it sounds so bad, like we compartmentalize us being a bad guy and a good guy, or doing bad things and being a good person. It's like there's one of those things where we say that we compartmentalize, but in actuality you do have a finite amount of attention, and that attention, once it fully loads into that situation, into that moment, it can only grasp so much, it can only understand so much, it can only track so many factors and conditions regarding that circumstance to make the best decision. So it's not really being compartmentalized. It's like I'm in a bad situation, I do something that's best within that situation. But if you ignore that context, if you ignore that the person is tortured, the person has been given, has been terribly conditioned, the person has learned helplessness, the person has no economic means, the person has no options, then you're judging that person without that context, and that's not true. You're judging a person based on his circumstances. One of the most empathic things that we can do. Like, so there's those things about mindfulness. It's like I'm sure it's in other philosophies, it's in other mindsets. It's just that when you combine it with CBT, you combine it with the basic philosophies of the day, of the age, humanism, and all these other things. Mindfulness is like, okay, now you know that in an academic way. Now learn that as a conditioned response. So you're like, yeah. So that's the difference within the philosophy that we study and mindfulness, is that you know this in a theoretical way. Now practice it. That's one of those things where I'm like, it's obvious, but unless you take the time to do something about it, it's not obvious. The way a lot of people make mistakes because there are details in the circumstance that they miss out because they're particularly looking for X. They're looking for another set of factors. It's only when they learn about these other factors and they realize, oh, this is, should have been. It's readily apparent. It's just not what we're trying to pay attention to right now. Especially given, okay, so you can become more forgiving when you realize that our attention really takes up 1 to 2 things at a time. Some of us are good at multitasking certain kinds of attention, certain kinds of tasks. Like me, talking a lot, and I used to get a lot of punishments for this. Yeah. During school, but yeah, me talking a lot and doing other things and how I process things. Like, I process things with talking, I process things with writing. The thing about writing is that I can reread the entire thought again, and I do that compulsively. I would reread it, like, and it becomes so alien to me after a while. Like, I reread it, it's like, did I write this? Was that me? Do I sound like a jerk? So it's like one of those things where my attention, I think, is so fragmented and so unstructured that writing structures it in some magical way, in some way that is so hard coded, that it's so hardwired that I cannot phantom, I cannot decompress it and then restructure it. So it's just this particular mental muscle. So yeah, that's one of my main takeaways of mindfulness, where it allows us to practice what we know academically in a way that, yeah, it gives it structure. So like, there are people who, like me, think when they write, and that's how think through writing. But teaching me this technique means there are times where I will think through using writing, and then there are times wherein I will just exercise my mind using meditation, bringing my mind back to focus to an object of awareness, like my breath, the sensation of this, and using open monitoring and realizing, like, sometimes, like, why can't I feel this? And that creates fear. Like, sometimes I'm holding something and it's come to the point that the sensation of holding it is that this neutral thing, that my body's at rest with it, that there is no sensation. It's kind of numb. There is no pain because I've, like, conditioned myself to, like, hold certain positions, like rest your legs, cross your legs, to a point that it doesn't feel anymore. So it's one of those things where you realize that, and it of course strikes fear, because pain tells you that the thing is working, and numbness thinks it is telling the body that, hey, don't fix this, or don't give resources to this. So there's that what you call this, there's that realization that triggers all these emotions and stuff. And yeah, so yeah, I think I was talking about like how there is a time for the techniques in meditation, and there's a time for thinking and writing. The question becomes is when is this time? And having so much technical debt in the family business, I don't know. And again, I don't know, will it ever work out? And those are the things that you think about. And if you try to practice stoicism, it's like, why should I care? Or I don't know, it's like there's this part about stoicism where you just detach. Why should I care? And there's that cynicism that drives that question, that takes you can draw comfort from. Like, why should I care? It doesn't really matter. Like, why do I have to feel this way about something that doesn't really matter in the long run? So it gives you this perspective. It allows you to reserve or save some emotional labor from this, and focus on things that are more important in your life. And you realize, like, when you ask those questions, like your emotions just stop. It's like that sadness, but you learn to, it's a slight kind of sadness, but you learn that sadness allows you to conserve energy, conserve certain emotions. Then you realize next is that what are the things that your effort is better applied to, and that's where you change emotional gears. That your labor of sadness from being cynical or unattached to a particular goal or circumstance is redirected to something more worthwhile and more that has feedback, which of course you forgot because you're juggling all these things, and there's only so many things that your mind can hold, that you have to put certain things down, and now you pick it back up and you realize, oh, this thing makes me happy. So there's that thing about mindfulness that allows me to juggle things better. And yeah, like the act of doing this video and stuff, and this video helps me process things more, helps me put into perspective what I'm already thinking. So these days, like moving forward, one of the major chapters of my life is studying mindfulness and figuring out a way to make time for it. Now, throughout my day, I have work, I have exercise, I have studies, I have family, and one of the things that's interesting is that one of the things about what's interesting about having so many things to do that are in different areas of your life, your relationships, your family, your studies, your professional work, your professional life, your physical condition, all of this means that we go through so many different aspects that we exercise every aspect of the day. Sometimes there'll be a physical challenge within your work life, there'll be a work challenge in your emotional life, there's all these other things that happen, and having an appreciation for all these different areas allows me to be mindful when I'm with my daughter or with my son or with my spouse, allows me to be mindful when I'm work. It just gives us more tools to do, more tools to attempt at our disposal when we're faced with a particular problem. So it's not so bad. It's not so bad. It's an advantage. It's an advantage, and it's helpful. It's helpful. It's just that, again, like everything in life, not everything is a perfect fit for everybody. Okay, so there's this one more other thing about the mindfulness which I really loved about the lecture, was that don't take yourself so seriously, you're not so wise and stuff. It's like, yeah, that's the thing. How do you keep humility? How do you stop yourself from comparing yourself? Like, no, you're wiser now. Like, of course, like, I see the restraint techniques people use. Like, they're punishing themselves for not maintaining a particular X, and it's so painful. I can imagine how painful it is, and I realize that, like, hey, this is a nicer technique. You're not as, you're not as harsh on yourself, because there's no point to being harsh. It's that energy you use being harsh, that extra word that you had to say that was harsh and painful. Did you have to say it? Like, there's one of those aspects, an economy of action, wherein whenever I use a word regarding like a problem, did I make it worse for every word? Did I make the person feel worse, or did I make that person focus more or see the value of what the correct course of action does? So there's one of those things wherein, okay, this is like high level stuff that I'm really, in theory, I'm sure it'll be a while, or I'm not sure if I can do, but like for every word you use, you increase the value of the correct action to take, versus to bring down someone or make someone feel bad. So this is one of those things about like the humility, the humility in mindfulness, wherein you tend to compare your techniques, and then that's the thing that you're inherently gonna do. You're gonna look at your technique and you're trying to look at for the better thing. And the thing about it is, like, how do you maintain that you're not being so judgy? So that's one of the things where I'm like, don't know, and I guess I'll just figure things out the way I'm figuring out now. And yeah, there's these times where I'm figuring it out as you see my reaction. I'm like, I don't know what to do. Let's go back to the basics. I'm not supposed to be judgy.